Mike's Daily Podcast.
I'm playing with a microphone that has little rubber bands holding it in place. That's what it looks like anyway, because it's all professional.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Hey, it's Mike Matthews, and it's my show. It's called Mike's Daily Podcast. Hey, how are you? We are doing this show from Podcastro Valley, today. Woohoo. It's going to be great because I've got so much in store for you. Oh, shoot, I left it in the other room. So much for that. Well, I am sure glad that you stopped by today.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Because I was lonely. And then you popped by and you said, "Hi, Mike, how are ya?"
Mike's
How are ya?
Daily
Doing.
Podcast.
Well, I'm doing fine.
Yeah!
I guess that I want to keep this podcast short today, so maybe the fact that I forgot something in the other room will do that, because then my content will be, more riveting. Yeah, today was a day where something horrible happened in Florida. Don't worry, yours truly's mom wasn't involved with that. She's in Daytona Beach, not where the thing fell down today. But suppose you are considering, hey, Mike, what you do seems so, by the way, I found out, looking at statistics, that I have a lot of listeners in Chicago, of all places. I don't know what it is. Is it perhaps this Chicagoan accent that I have? Is it that because my lovely lady friend used to live in Chicago? I don't know. But for some reason, I am big in Chicago, not big in Japan. Like that Alphaville song. But here I am. So let's say, for example, you want to start a podcast. And you're like, I can do what Mike's doing, only 12 times better. Not 5, not 11, but 12 times better. And you're going to consider making a podcast.
Here's today's podcast picture.
Well, first you need a podcast picture. No, really, you need a picture to put at the beginning. Hey everyone, Ed Sheeran's new song Bad Habits drops tonight. It's expected to be huge. I remember a time when songs didn't drop. Songs were just light. They stayed up in the air. Sometimes they were heavy. Man, that's heavy. That song is heavy. And, then there was a little bit of weight involved. And the song would not be as... But they would never drop. That just became a thing. Do you know who I first saw use the term drop? Was Macy Gray. That's right, Basil the Boxer. Macy Gray. Do you remember? Oh, the late, great Basil the Boxer. I think I will post a podcast picture of him from 2 years ago. 3 years ago? Yeah, let's go back in time to 3 years ago. We were at this wonderful area in Podcastro Valley. Here, it's a school. It's a school in Podcastro Valley, and we would go there, and we weren't really supposed to. They don't allow dogs at the schools. But we would go there because everybody else is going. Now they got a fence. You can't get through there. And, Basil's gone, so it doesn't matter anymore. But, yes, he enjoyed this little spot. So I'll post a podcast picture of that. Mike'sDailyPodcast.com from 3 years ago. So, yes, Macy Gray apparently thinks we should have a new flag. Have a different flag. The American flag is racist and bad and is just, it's wrong. But you have to understand, I think, years and years ago, I had maybe a different thought than what I have now, but after you've known a lot of people in the military and they fight for it's like you're fighting for the flag because you're fighting for your country, and the flag becomes very significant in that. And so it means a lot, especially to Americans. So I understand the whole thing about don't touch the flag, leave it alone. Macy Gray's nuts. What's going on? I don't know. You know that song she had? Sometimes I choke. My thoughts. What? How did the heck did that song go? So I to say goodbye, but I choke. Try to talk away, but I'm a fumble. I try to say it's clear. My world crumbles when you are not there. I used to think she's saying, I blow bubbles when you are not here. There. Anyway, that was Cafe Anyway, late 90s. That was a 90s song. Isn't that crazy? 1999. Well, it's also considered a 2000 song, but so... That was 21 years ago, Macy Gray. Is she as that pertinent, as important today as she was then? No. But what makes podcasts different? Podcasts are a great way to build a genuine connection with your audience, says Buzzsprout.com. Instead of the fractured connection you make through social media, podcasts allow you to engage your audience. With unique long-form content, podcasts are more convenient than blog posts. People can listen to podcasts while driving, working out, or doing chores around the house. I like to think that you're doing a chore right now around the house. Kevin, who used to do the segment Addendum with Kevin, used to listen to this podcast while cleaning up at 21st Amendment. He'd have to do some cleaning with the vats and the beer and whatnot. You know, the puke. I'm assuming because they sold a lot of beer there, and you know some people overindulge. So, one time I was interviewing a musician. This is when I used to have musicians on my podcast. Amy something. Was it Amy? The gal that plays the bass really well. She's in all these bands. Super popular. In fact, the podcast for Mike's Daily Podcast is also on YouTube, where it's just the audio and the podcast picture. You don't see any video, although I do quick little short video clips in between every podcast. I've been doing that for a year. But this lady plays the bass, and the whole time we were doing the interview, she was cleaning up around her house, had the vacuum cleaner on. She's just walking around with her little earbuds in. Oh, this is before earbuds, but yeah. As we go outside a Cafe Anyway, we're bringing you Mike's Daily Podcast somewhere in Podcastro Valley, Mont today. For every podcast, there are 750 blogs and 29 YouTube channels. Only 800,000 podcasts. Imagine the incredible opportunity there was to start a blog in 2004, and you'll have an idea of where podcasting is today. Podcasts are as varied as the people that create them. You want to first develop a podcast concept. There are excellent podcasts about pop culture, neuroscience, a fictional town where aliens are friends with the Yeti. See, that podcast is famous because it's so out there. And I thought my podcast was out there because I'm at a restaurant called Cafe Anyway, somewhere in Podcastro Valley, Mont, the last place on earth, but apparently not. And I've been doing this podcast for over 10 years, and I'm just as popular as Macy Gray. So, the only limit to what you can do with a podcast is your own imagination. Just remember, everybody else is using their imagination too. So it will be something, regardless, do a podcast. To start, ask yourself, why am I starting a podcast, and what is my podcast about? That is a very interesting question. I don't think I've ever asked myself those questions, which I guess shows. I started a podcast. No, I know why. I started a podcast because I thought, well, heck, I've been in radio. At that point, I think I had been in radio for 30 years. I said, I want to try something with podcasting. There are no rules. There are no limits. I'm just going to go for it and see what happens. And then I said, at the time, in 2011, there was not that many daily podcasts. And I thought, how awesome could that be? When you do it daily, it's almost like you're doing a daily radio show. And then soon after, Adam Carolla was doing a daily podcast, which I think he has stopped that. It's not easy to do. And you know, I get interrupted. Although I have done a daily podcast this week every day, sometimes I get into a groove. Identify your podcast goals. To help you get started, here are some common goals in podcasting. To generate leads for a business? Oh, yeah, that sure works for me. To be recognized as a leader in an industry? Yeah, that sure works for me. To share an important message? That sure works to me. To have fun? That works for me. Pick a podcast theme or topic. For example, today's podcast is about podcasts. It's meta. You can search your show's topic in Apple Podcasts, formerly iTunes, to see if there are already podcasts in that genre. If there are, listen to a handful of episodes to see what they're doing well and think of ways you could improve. Name your podcast. When picking a podcast name, try to pick something catchy, memorable, and that will rank for your podcast relevant keywords. Apple Podcast uses title, author, and description fields for search. Use keywords without stuffing. You don't want to stuff your title with keywords, but you do want to make it easy for people to find your podcast. If you have a one-word or two-word podcast name, add a brief description in the title tag to help search results. Don't create podcast artwork yet. Even though we're doing all the prep work, we suggest holding off on creating artwork right now. Your podcast is in its infancy, and as a result, the concept for your show will probably change a little as you record your first episodes. Oh, that's well put. And you know what? The other problem that I find with podcasters is that they just abandon the podcast after about a month. Or maybe even after just one episode, they abandon it. Because it's work, and they're not ready for it. Well, let's zip through the rest of this. Choose your podcast format. If you love improv and banter, you'll need to have a co-host. Yeah, that's right. No, that's not. Unless you're me. If you like having everything planned out and scripted, you might lean toward an audio drama. I don't like the scripted and planned out. I hate that. I hate it because people always sound like they're reading. You can always tell, unless they are really good. But even the best actors sound like they are. Oh, there's a perfect example of it. There's a local radio station, publicly funded, NPR-type station, that runs a playhouse type thing on Friday nights. And oh my gosh, you've got these, the late, what's his name? Charles Durning? I'm saying the name wrong. He was in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? He was awesome. He sounded like he was reading. And it was one of these scripted plays that they read, in front of microphones. And if you were to watch that, it would be boring as heck, but on the radio, it can be interesting. So there are common formats like interview podcasts, scripted nonfiction, news recap, educational podcasts, scripted fiction. Yeah, I do a little bit of all that. Optimal podcast length is 20 to 30 minutes. How long are we going today so far? We're at 13. Oop, we need to wrap this up. The rest is have a podcast publishing schedule, develop a connection with your listeners. Holy smoke, this is going to go on and on. Podcast equipment, yeah. Oh, it talks about all the recording your first episode, editing, then it goes into editing, and then it's okay. So there you go. A little bit of ideas for you if you want to start a podcast. Look, we're outside a cafe anyway. Look who's here. Somewhere in Podcaster Valley Mont. Hello, Michael Mash. It's Matt Rutabaga, and I love to talk about podcasting. Oh, thank you. Look who else is here. Hello there, Mike. This is Valentino, the parenting attendant. And it's Bison Bentley. Do you know that? Mike, that's great that you like the podcast there. Yeah, podcasting. Do you know that? We should throw a little more science fiction into the show. Madam Rutabaga, are you an alien? Yes. Are you from outer space? Yes. Do you have a laser gun? No. Dang it. Next show, it'll be the wonderful Shelley Shuhart, Floyd the Foreman, and John Deere the Engineer. Chime in about anything we talked about today. You can call me 336MM Daily. 3 plus 3 equals 6. MM is in Mike Matthews Daily, as in what this podcast has been now for quite a few days. This is awesome. Let's see if we can keep it going. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And other ways to contact me, here's A-Frame. And thank you for listening to episode 2256.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com.
Email Mike now at
mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. See you